There's a power in protecting what's yours, a deep, unyielding power that comes from knowing your home is your sanctuary, built from sweat, perseverance, and the love of your family. In one quiet suburban neighborhood, where every lawn is trimmed to perfection and every home reflects a legacy of hard work, Marcus Washington's residence stood as a testament to dignity and pride. For years, Marcus had maintained his property with meticulous care, a small haven that offered peace from a world that often demanded too much. His son Jamal, an 8-year-old full of life and bright energy, played joyfully on the lawn, a living reminder of hope and resilience. But on one fateful afternoon, that sense of sanctuary was violently shattered. It began like any ordinary day. The sun hung high in the clear Texas sky, and the neighborhood hummed with the gentle sounds of everyday life. Marcus sat on his porch, savoring a glass of iced tea while reading a book, his eyes occasionally drifting to his perfectly maintained lawn. Everything was as it had always been, orderly, proud, and undisturbed. Yet in a single horrifying instant, the fabric of that peace was torn apart. From across the street a figure approached with a swagger that had become all too familiar. Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed enforcer of the neighborhood's homeowners association HOA rules, was on her way. Known for her rigid adherence to petty regulations and a demeanor that exuded entitlement, Karen had built her reputation on fining neighbors for the smallest infractions, whether it was a garbage can left out too long, a basketball hoop that had hung undisturbed for years, or even a front door painted in a hue that did not match her exacting standards. To her, every detail mattered, and she believed that it was her duty to police every corner of the community. That day, however, Karen's purpose was darker than usual. As she strode toward Marcus's house, her eyes narrowed with a fierce determination. There was an energy about her, a dangerous mix of self-importance and malice, that promised more than just another routine citation. In a moment that would live forever in the memory of the neighborhood, she reached the edge of the yard where Jamal was playing. Without a word, without any provocation, she raised her hand and slapped Jamal across the face. The sound of that slap was like a clap of thunder, an act so shocking that time itself seemed to slow down. Jamal's eyes widened in shock, and tears sprang to his eyes as he recoiled from the blow. In that instant, every bit of the peace and pride Marcus had built was attacked, and his heart broke for his son. Marcus, a man known for his calm and steady presence as a respected officer in the community, felt his world shatter. Yet behind his composed exterior lay a secret that few ever suspected, a past filled with darkness and deadly precision. For Marcus had once lived a life far removed from the orderly world he now maintained. In the shadows of his former life, he had been a hitman, a man who had taken down dangerous criminals with ruthless efficiency. That hidden past, long buried under layers of honor and duty, now surged forth as he looked at his son's tear-streaked face. The injustice of Karen's actions was something he could no longer tolerate. Without a moment's hesitation, Marcus stepped forward and placed himself between Karen and his son. His voice was low and steady, carrying a promise that sent a chill down the spine of everyone within earshot. "How dare you lay a hand on my son?" he said, his tone controlled but heavy with unspoken threat. There was no anger in his voice, only a cold, determined resolve. His eyes, dark and unyielding, locked onto Karen's, and in that gaze was a message that would not be ignored. Karen's confident facade wavered for just a moment before she tried to recover. "I'm just enforcing the rules," she sneered, her tone dismissive as though slapping a child were nothing more than a minor scolding. "You know the HOA has strict standards around here." But her words fell flat in the face of Marcus's unwavering look. "Rules," he said quietly. "You call that enforcing rules? Slapping a child is not discipline, it's abuse. You have no right to treat anyone, especially my son, this way." The sound of the slap and the firm, calm response rippled through the quiet street. Neighbors, who had once whispered about Karen's petty behavior, now watched in stunned silence. Jamal, still trembling in his father's protective arms, looked up with wide, tear-filled eyes. In that charged moment, Marcus's secret past became an unspoken warning, a past that had taught him that when someone crosses the line, the consequences can be as swift as they are severe. For Marcus, every day had been built on the principle that no one should ever trample on what is sacred. His home was not just a physical space, but a symbol of his values and his legacy. And when Karen, with her endless list of petty fines and arrogant demands, tried to destroy that sanctuary by striking his son, Marcus knew he could no longer stand idle. "You've picked the wrong fight," he said softly. Yet every word carried the weight of his dangerous past, a past where he had learned that those who abuse their power ultimately face the full force of justice. In that moment, the entire dynamic of the neighborhood began to shift. Neighbors, who had long been too afraid to speak out against Karen's bullying, started to murmur among themselves. The air grew thick with tension and anticipation as people began to realize that this was not just another HOA dispute. This was a turning point, a moment when one man's unwavering commitment to protecting his family would expose the corrupt abuse of power that had plagued their community for too long. Over the next several hours, the repercussions of that one act of violence rippled outward. Social media exploded with the story, and soon neighbors began sharing their own experiences of harassment, stories of being fined for a misbehaving garbage can, or for a basketball hoop that had been there for years, or for simply having a mailbox that wasn't painted the approved shade of white. The common thread was clear: Karen's enforcement was not about preserving property values, it was about control, about asserting her authority over those who could not easily defend themselves. Marcus, known for his calm and measured approach, began to gather evidence with a methodical precision. He recorded every text message, every piece of security footage, every whispered testimony from his neighbors. In his 25 years on the force, he had seen many injustices, but never had he witnessed such a targeted personal attack. The evidence he compiled painted a stark picture of a system that was rigged against the hard-working, the vulnerable, and the courageous. Days turned into a tense standoff. Karen's behavior grew increasingly erratic as the pressure mounted. Neighbors recalled instances of her bullying that they had long endured in silence. Her threats, once delivered with haughty confidence, now sounded desperate as she realized that the community was no longer willing to tolerate her abuse. Every act of intimidation, every petty fine, was now under scrutiny, and the collective voice of the neighborhood demanded accountability. Amid this growing turmoil, Marcus remained a steadfast pillar of strength. His presence, both as a dedicated officer and as a man with a formidable past, became a beacon of hope for those who had suffered. He continued to protect his home and his family with the quiet assurance of someone who had faced danger time and again. Yet beneath his calm exterior, a storm was brewing, a storm that promised retribution for every injustice inflicted by Karen. The turning point came when Karen's false authority reached its breaking point. In a desperate bid to maintain control, she attempted to rally her supporters by threatening further fines, and even hinting at involving fake HOA police to enforce her draconian rules. But Marcus's words cut through the bluster. "You have no right to intimidate my family or any of our neighbors," he said. "Your petty fines and fake rules mean nothing when you cross the line and hurt a child." His voice was steady, but the conviction behind it was unmistakable, a promise that the consequences of her actions would be severe. The moment stretched on, and every neighbor felt the gravity of the situation. The sound of children playing, the rustle of the wind in the trees, and the distant hum of everyday life, all seemed to pause as the community braced itself for what was to come. It was clear that Karen's actions had ignited a fire that would not be easily extinguished. The hunter had indeed become the hunted. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift. Neighbors, emboldened by Marcus's courage, began to speak out. Stories of harassment emerged from every corner of the community. Sarah Thompson, the tired nurse, recalled how she had been hounded by Karen for minor infractions. Mark, the firefighter, described the relentless fines that had been imposed on him for a simple basketball hoop. Even the local teacher, once silent in fear, now shared how his daily routine had been disrupted by arbitrary citations. Every story confirmed one undeniable truth: Karen's reign of terror was built on a foundation of abuse and corruption. With each passing day, Marcus's investigation grew stronger. He collected witness statements, recorded angry texts, and gathered security footage that showed Karen's constant presence, her cameras snapping pictures of anything and everything. Her behavior was not random, it was systematic harassment aimed at those who were most vulnerable. As the evidence mounted, the community's outcry grew louder, and the once overbearing enforcer found her power slipping away. Finally, the day came when the community decided that enough was enough. In a packed town hall meeting, residents gathered to demand accountability and change. With a quiet resolve that had become Marcus's trademark, he stood before the assembled neighbors and laid out the evidence, a meticulously organized case that left no doubt about the corruption at the heart of the HOA's practices. His words resonated deeply, and the atmosphere in the room shifted from anger to a determined unity. The vote was unanimous. Karen Mitchell would be removed from any position of power, and a full review of the HOA's policies would be undertaken. But even as Karen was forced out, the story took one final, unforgettable twist, a twist that would become the stuff of neighborhood legend. In a community where many relied on guard dogs to protect their property, Marcus had a secret that few knew about, a legally maintained collection of exotic animals kept on his property. Deep within a secluded, heavily fortified section of his yard, lay a secure pond where two massive crocodiles, nicknamed Goliath and Viper, lived in carefully controlled conditions. These creatures, symbols of raw nature and unyielding power, were normally hidden from view, a private reminder of the wild unpredictability of the world. On the day of the community celebration, when residents gathered to mark the beginning of a new era of fairness and unity, Karen, desperate to salvage what remained of her authority, attempted one final act of intimidation. Clutching her clipboard and armed with her usual bravado, she strode toward Marcus's property to document further violations. But before she could act, Marcus calmly walked to the hidden switch that controlled the heavy metal gate at the edge of his secluded pond. With a soft click, the gate swung open, and out emerged Goliath and Viper. The crocodiles glided across the lawn, with deliberate, silent purpose, their dark eyes locked onto Karen. For several long, heart-stopping moments, the only sounds were the slow, measured movements of the crocodiles, and the collective gasps of the onlookers. Karen's confident mask crumbled as she stepped back, her eyes wide with terror. "Get back!" Marcus's voice rang out, steady and resolute. "This is my property, and if you ever try to intimidate my family again, you'll face the consequences." The sight of the enormous reptiles, glistening in the fading light, was a moment of pure unadulterated justice, a living reminder that when you try to take what isn't yours, nature itself can deliver a message that is impossible to ignore. Karen's desperate pleas, her voice trembling as she begged for mercy, were drowned out by the determined silence of a community united against abuse. In the weeks that followed, the story of that day spread far and wide. Neighbors recounted the events with a mixture of shock, satisfaction, and a newfound sense of empowerment. Social media exploded with the tale, turning it into a modern fable of retribution. Headlines in local papers celebrated the day when an entitled bully was brought low by the courage of one man who refused to back down. Karen's actions were exposed in full, and the corrupt practices of the old HOA were dismantled piece by piece. For Marcus, the experience was a profound reminder that true power lies not in the enforcement of petty fines, or the imposition of arbitrary rules, but in the courage to stand up for what is right. Every time he pulled into his driveway after that day, he did so with renewed pride, secure in the knowledge that his home, his sanctuary, was his to protect. His family, especially his brave son Jamal, would never again be at the mercy of bullies who believed they could trample on the rights of others. In the months that followed, the community of Willow Creek underwent a remarkable transformation. The old oppressive HOA was reformed, and new policies were put in place to ensure fairness, transparency, and respect for every resident's space. First responders, nurses, firefighters, and teachers, those who had once suffered silently, found their voices amplified. Neighbors began organizing meetings and community events, and the spirit of unity prevailed. The tale of that fateful day, when a petty act of violence sparked a full-blown battle for justice, became a legend, a story that would be told, and retold, as a powerful reminder that no one is above the law. Marcus's quiet determination, his hidden past, and his unyielding commitment to protecting his family, had not only changed his own life, but had also paved the way for a more just and compassionate community. If you believe in standing up for what's right, if you know that true power comes from defending your loved ones and your space, then remember this story. Please like, share and subscribe for more true accounts of justice and resilience. Comment below with where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on how one act of defiance can spark monumental change. In the end, the legacy of that day in Willow Creek was not merely about a violent confrontation, or the downfall of an entitled bully. It was about a community reclaiming its dignity, about a father who would do whatever it took to protect his child, and about the unwavering truth that when you try to take what isn't yours, the consequences will catch up with you. Marcus's journey, his steadfast resolve, and the dramatic twist of nature's own intervention served as a powerful lesson, a lesson that echoed through every corner of the neighborhood, reminding everyone that true peace comes from standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. Comment below with where you're watching from, because when you defend your space, the impact can change the world.